So this is an old vintage flower aquarium which I'm going to use and make into a terrarium. Now this one, if you look at it, you can see where it's been repaired right there and underneath a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, it's probably hard to show you in the light, but down in there. Anyway, it also has a seal on it that is dry rotted but relatively intact, and I say relatively because there is a crack in it right over here. And I'm not sure what this brown gunk is, but you know, you would have had 5 flowers tied here, and then you would have had this filled with water. And at one point it wasn't filled all the way with water. You can see the ring, but hopefully as humidity and condensation on the inside of the glass, it should not be too visible as a terrarium. And anyway, we're going to use the base and the top of this. These, I'm going to put them in a bag and label them, because with old things, you know, I like to keep everything original. So if I ever do want to get rid of this and someone does want the original parts, it's good to put this in a bag and label it, you know, and then I can always keep it with this and know what this went for. But for now, I'm just going to toss it to the side, and I'm going to use a piece of craft foam that I'm going to use as a base in here. Now, one issue I have is that I didn't have any large pieces of black craft foam at the moment. I'm running low in that. I do have a little strip of black one I'm going to use in a moment, but before I take this out, I brought it back. This piece is actually, if you look at it, it's actually just a little bit wider than this plastic piece. I considered keeping this all in there, but I'm not going to make it messy. So you could simply, let's see, I just want to make sure I'm going to have this. You see how this curves out? So I want to take the wider section and put that down. And there are 2 ways to do this. Well, 3 ways. You could draw an outline and cut it with a pair of scissors, or you could just hold this here and cut it with a pair of scissors, or you could take a box cutter and just cut around the edge. I'm going to try that first before I use a pair of scissors. So I have here a piece of cardboard that I'm going to use so I don't ruin that piece. And I'm going to place this as close to the edge as I can. Some people like it a little further in. I'll just do it a little further in. So make sure you don't slice your fingers. And I'm just going to trace around the edge. You don't have to cut all the way through either. It's just better sometimes to make multiple passes. Usually the second pass will cut through. And try not to cut my fingers. Well, it's probably better if I turn this around. Sometimes these things are a little tricky, and this board underneath, or this cardboard, is warped, so that makes it tricky as well. But you just want to cut lightly rather than try to cut it with one pass and risk slipping and slicing your finger and then going to the emergency room. And you see it is coming loose, so it is working, but by using the box cutter, you do get a nice cleaner cut, especially if the blade is sharp. This blade isn't the sharpest. I've been using it a lot, and I probably will have to replace the blade pretty soon on there. Okay, so you don't want to just pull and leave like shredded pieces sticking out of the craft foam. So by just running multiple passes, you're not going to stretch out the edge of the craft foam much. I can now safely take this out, so there we go. So you know, you don't want to start pulling and having too many frayed edges. Okay, now I can toss this aside. I don't need that anymore. We can take these away. And I'm going to make sure that this base is the right size and fits. If it's a little snug, it's better than a little loose, but it probably doesn't matter that much. And there we go. So next, what we're gonna do, whoops, I can just keep that in there, is I have a strip of black craft foam, and I didn't have a piece big enough for the base, and it goes in here, but the problem is I don't want to cut it to that size because then I won't be able to put the top on. So what I'm gonna do, wow, that could be an easy jar for like candy or something. You know, I just don't, it's, for some reason this one I have smells on the inside. I don't know what previous owners have done. I wonder about people sometimes. So anyway, you can get this smaller just to see exactly where you need to be on here to cut it. I'd rather have it a little larger than to actually like have it too loose. But if you look at it, if I have this in there, it's sticking up too high. So I'm gonna have to cut about, I'm gonna mark it right there by pressing down on the edge. It's going to leave an imprint in the craft foam. So that's where I pressed, and it didn't leave an imprint. But anyway, I'm going to have to measure this length here and then cut the strip to that size. So what I can do is that right there, press down, and now you can see right here is the width I need to cut, and then the strip can be chucked. So now let me go ahead and get this cut using my paper cutter. Okay, this is going to be tricky since that piece of cardboard rocks, but it's what I use as a background. And now when I look at it right here, so I'm just going to, it's going to be a little bigger, but actually I could get it a little smaller right there. Ah, perfect. Okay, I'm actually just going to be safe and make it a little bigger because I don't think it will make a big difference. This is an old English-made paper cutter from the 80s, and it is so much better. All the ones you find these days are horrible. I mean, absolutely horrible. This one has a real blade, not a flat edge, so you can actually get more cut. But see, I'm lining it up, making sure it's butted really good against that. And then watching my fingers. One thing is, because I went beyond the edge here, because I had it too thin, it, you know, didn't cut all the way. So I'm going to actually, whoops, put this part flush against the blade. So there I finished it. It's a little uneven. You know, it isn't an older paper cutter, but it's such a great one. But this should work. So let me get this out of the way and we'll continue on the project. Okay, now that we have the strip cut, we can take the other piece, get rid of it. And the question is, do I want to cut using the shorter piece off and have it butted, or do I want this to overlap, and how far do I want it to overlap? So I think I'm just going to keep the whole thing. So what I'm going to do, it's great that the base actually works perfectly for this, is since the paper cutter cut a little askew, you know, it is an older one, but it does a much better job cutting. You know, just not the straightest job cutting. I'm going to just place this there and let this expand as much as I can, and then have this side flush. So what I'm going to do is use some glue. It's not the best glue I have here, but you know, it's what's available for me at the moment. And I'm actually going to make sure this is going to be as wide as I can get it. Okay, so now I can pull this out, move that away, And I'm just going to glue one side first. This glue turns white, so I want to make sure I'm not going to overdo it. Okay. Whoops. There we go. And I just want to double check. Actually, I can slip it in here so that it is, whoops, it is going to stay put. And I want to make sure I didn't get any on there, right? Good. So now I want to hold it and let it dry. You can actually set it down so it does dry. Double check it. You see it slid a little bit. Okay, I guess it would be better to be a little smaller than perfectly flush. I'm getting it on my hands, yuck. Okay, so I'm just going to hold it there for a few minutes. Then I'll want to get the inside. While I'm holding it, I'm going to go ahead and get the inside a little bit. And then I'll let it sit and dry for a moment before we continue. So that's how I'm going to do it. Oops, I got too much on there. But before I let it sit and dry, I want to double check. So there we go. And now we let it sit and dry. Okay, so this should be adequately dry by now. I don't really want to wait overnight to finish this project. And I have a selection of plants. This fern I bought before I bought these two plants, and I used a little piece for something, but I didn't water it, so anyway I had to revive it, so it's still not plush. And then I have over here some Irish moss seeds. I bought these a couple of years ago off the internet, and I haven't even used them. I hope they're still viable. I never researched how long seeds stay viable, but in the humid environment of the terrarium, that should be optimal for those to sprout. So I'm going to use Irish moss versus collecting moss from the yard. And as you can see, the side I'm going to have at the top has less of the white gunk from the glue. So this piece here at the bottom is what I'm keeping flush, so when it's sitting down in here it's going to stay flush. So I'm going to set this in here for now, and just if you notice, I'm just going to keep it near the edge over here. Then you have the thickness of the jar, and then I should fill it. But let me just grab that globe quickly and just test it out. Oops. Okay. So I got the globe. I'm going to set it now on top of this, just to see if I'm able to close it in all the way. And I am. So you see how it's turning. If you look in there, you see at the very back when I turn, you see the white moving around. So it's going with the globe and not with the base. So that's going to be tricky, but the issue is, you see it's not a perfect circle, and it won't be until it's in there. So hopefully it will still work. You know, I've never really converted one of these to a terrarium before, but it's going to be an interesting project. Now, I personally don't like to put layers of different substrates and things, you know, gravel, charcoal, etc. in terrariums, but I know some people will cringe if I don't do anything. So for the gravel at the bottom to collect excess water, I'm just going to use some perlite. Then as the roots of these plants go down in there, it's going to, you know, provide a little nutrients, because this is the Miracle Grow brand, which, you know, they lace with fertilizers. So it's like if you use these for carnivorous plants and you bought the Miracle Grow brand, you really want to basically rinse it out before you apply it to your carnivorous plants. Even though the amount of fertilizer isn't really that much, and I probably put a little too much of this in here. This is just an old Folgers crystals cap. When I don't have time to make or brew coffee, I can use instant, and this coffee works well. Some people are like, ew, instant. Then here, is a bag of yellow onions, and I'm going to use the mesh from it as a mesh. So what I need to do now is cut the end off. Oops, we don't want that in there, do we? Oh, look what I just did, I messed up. So now what I have to do is restart this. So I need to pull this out, clean off that, and pour this back in there without making a mess, which I foresee is going to happen. On the bright side, this piece held up pretty well. Let's make sure that's all in there. So what I'm doing is patting this side there just to shake whatever I can off. Okay, I'm just going to move these to the inside. My hands are a little sticky from that horrid glue I used. Word of advice: don't buy Gorilla Glue. You're not only getting a word of advice, but you're actually getting a visualization of how messy it is compared to other super glues, etc. Okay, I should have probably just glued a little down there, but you see how it's not round, so I just need to be careful. And then if you do happen to drop pieces in there, using simple tweezers, you can grab them. Okay, I do have a few pieces there. You want this to be airtight, so you don't have to worry. So I'm just tweezing these out one by one, but this shifted and I'm gonna have to retweeze. Okay, so I really don't like messing with multiple substrates for a terrarium because of that. Well, not just because of that, but also if the terrarium goes sour and you decide you want to chuck everything, at least perlite is generally put into soil, so this soil that's in here can be reused. But I feel like it's just wasteful when you add layers of substrate, unless you're able to maintain a terrarium for years and stuff. Now, one thing about this terrarium is it's perfectly sealed, which makes it trickier to do maintenance. And that's one reason why I'm trying to make this where I won't have to do a lot of maintenance too. So anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and take these out. Let's see if I can. There we go. See, I take a sheet of paper and it's folded in half, so then it becomes like a little thing to slide the extras. I'm going to just put that there. If you do wish to create a base, and then add a false bottom, you can always use this type of mesh. But because this is such a thin area, I could have made this a little higher and then put things around, etc. But I'm not really going to bother doing all that because I don't think it's necessary. But you can see how we have one item. I was hesitant at converting this into a terrarium with these plants because I felt like it essentially is a little small for it, but if I can get them in there and then they fan out, it should look okay. So really you want to get rid of some of the soil. Actually, I'm just going to get rid of all the soil, or almost all. See how dry this soil is compared to the other one. And one reason to do that is so this can fit there, because I would like it flush. And you see how I have the fern hanging out? That's going to look nice. And then this plant, really I guess I could have used just a couple plants and Irish moss, but I think I will put this button begonia, at least that's what I think it's called. I don't know if I want to keep these runners on there or just remove them. Wow, this was dry. And I'm going to just go ahead and stick this in there, and then I'll determine if I want to do anything with the rest of them. But that's going to look nice with Irish moss growing around there, isn't it? And then these runners I'm going to cut. Let's see, I'm just going to use the pair of scissors I have and cut them. I might do something with these runners, see if I can get them to actually grow and then put them in some other project. So we're just going to test this out for now, but in the meantime, we have this, there we go. So those I can use for something else. I like how it does actually spread nicely, which is cool, actually, if you come to think about it. And then this growing medium, I'm just going to fit it in there. And try not to get any in there. This is really a tricky project, isn't it? I think that's going to be worse than putting the globe on. When I have that in there, that's going to look nice. But I do want to put the soil in there before I put the begonia seeds. I mean, not the begonia seeds, but the Irish moss seeds. You know, if there is any pieces of soil, I could always do that. But fortunately, the craft foam is compressible, so if there's a little soil there, it shouldn't be a big deal. I just want to make sure the perlite doesn't fall between them, because that will be a big deal. Okay. So, you know, I'm not too worried if it doesn't fill every little nook and cranny, because the humid environment of the terrarium will be adequate, and then the gaps will let the roots breathe and spread and everything. But as I'm filling this in, it's stretching that round craft foam to where it will be more round in shape, which is nice. I just didn't have the patience to work with a false bottom, especially since a lot of people use them. I don't really do much. And now I have enough soil in here. So I don't want to overdo it and spill. Miraculously, I didn't get too much soil in there, just hardly anything actually, so that's good. Now I need to take the Irish moss. They actually put a small bag of the seeds in there because, like, seeds and seeds, one bag in another bag. And that's actually convenient for me because I don't have to worry about all these teeny weeny seeds being lost in a much bigger bag. Okay, now how can I open this though? There we go. That's another problem with these teeny weeny bags. It's hard to shake out. Look how tiny those seeds are. Wow, I don't know if you can even see them in there. But, you know, hopefully as the Irish moss grows and spreads in there, it will look beautiful, and I'm just going to shake them in between there, as opposed to putting them on my hands just to make sure I get them. And I'm just going to use all the seeds because they are a couple years old. Well, at least all the seeds I can get out of the bag. There we go. Okay. Now I'm just going to give this a little bit of water via distilled water. I just have a squirt bottle of distilled water, and for such a small environment, this should be enough. You don't want to overwater this and let it seep out the side, but you want to give enough water that it still soaks up in there like a sponge. So just going a little bit here and a little bit there too will help with that. Okay, I probably overdid it. Yep, I overdid it there. I got a little carried away. It's coming out the bottom. But you know, that will eventually just soak up in there. One thing you can do to add a little moisture is, you know, get the leaves wet. But in this case, they're just falling down into the bottom of the pot. Now we can try to get the lid on here. And you know, by being moistened, they have enough water, but by not overwatering, it shouldn't fog up too severely when the sun hits it if I place it at a sunny windowsill. But now, being careful, like if you look, there's a begonia leaf being stuck under there, so you want to get that leaf out. Come on, you leaf. Okay, take two. Since these leaves are bigger, I'm just going to get them in first. Whoops. This is where you could use a second pair of hands. But it worked. So now I have to see it's not rotating as much anymore. But I did want the begonia in the foreground, and I'm glad that the two portions that are cracked are towards the back. And once the Irish moss starts to grow in there, it's going to look really, really nice. I am a little disappointed that the seam in the glass is not the other way, but as long as it's this way, as that fern in the back grows, as this does whatever, and the begonia and then the Irish moss, it will look nice. As mentioned earlier, you want to save this and label it to make sure it goes with that terrarium and formerly flower aquarium. So I stuck it in a Ziploc bag, and I can label it using either a ballpoint pen or a marker, but the better thing to do is to label the bag before you put it in there. So let's say parts for vintage flower aquarium. Okay, there we go. And now we get to put this aside and not have to throw it away and make it a lost piece of a nice vintage, well, piece of junk realistically. Anyway, this is the final result. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.